ready to receive what you want to teach us and show us. Please speak through Ruben. Help us have good conversation, good questions, good discussion. And again, may we continue to learn through the life of David. Amen.
For a second, thought those were boots. Your socks.
Oh, no, my boots are right there.
I know. I was like, oh, there's some cool. All right. I showed up a few minutes late tonight. Did you guys talk about how the 6K turned out? Anybody say?
It was good.
Yeah.
It was one of our smaller attended ones, but we still raised over $1,200. And even though we started later in the day and it was really hot, it was good.
Yeah.
It was really good. Yeah, we had one girl who her and her husband just started coming to Yass. They're pretty young, and they're from Lighthouse, and she came with her mom and sister, which was awesome. And they were kind of a last minute add-on, which was really cool. Yeah, it was good.
Good. All right. And then let's see. So what's the next event?
So next up is just the rummage sale, and then the mission trip, and then we have the Encompass Prayer Night. It's 24 hours on June 23rd. So there's a sign up here if anybody wants to commit to one of those 24 hours. You can do several if you'd like to, but this is basically just saying that you'll show up for this hour or whenever. So I encourage everybody to look at that and figure it out.
Is that the thing that's going on at the bridge?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, we had to sign up at Yass, and then
Prayer's not just a thing, John.
Okay. Cool.
And the
Yeah,
ladies are
dumb.
doing a fundraiser for scholarshiping people to women's retreat, so
Mhm.
you can ask us. Yeah, the cookies are a bit more of an increased price because they're homemade and they're amazing, and it's a fundraiser.
Yes, it's a
But
fundraiser.
Chandra makes incredible treats, and she's making monster cookies or mini cheesecakes. And you can order like one or like 6 or 12, I think, and we have the information, and it's to raise money for people that can't go on or need scholarship help for the women's retreat, which is not till the fall, but yeah. And then there are little registration forms for all church summer camp in the sanctuary, and that is Thursday, August 3rd through Sunday the 6th. And the prices are on there for adults. It's $95 for all 3 nights. Junior high and senior high, I think it's $85. Elementary kids, it's $45. And then kids 5 and under, it's $20. But there's scholarships if people need that, and you can bring a tent or an RV if you have one, or cabins. And it's gonna be awesome.
Yes.
How much are the cabins?
It's the same price regardless if you're bringing anything, but the cabins sleep 10 people. But like your family can sign up for one, or 10 mattresses on bunk beds, and then or couples can last year took a bunch of mattresses and put them on the floor. And there's the lodge.
So if it holds 10 and it's $95 an adult, if Tosh and I paid $1,000, we get a whole cabin to ourselves.
No doubt.
Okay.
It's 95 an adult.
Per adult for the whole, the food and the whole lodging and everything. The Forest Service and the camp charge lodging, so we have to pay them for that, and that's part of it. And then food. And Taylor's mom is already working on an awesome menu for people. And the little slips are just kind of like, if there's dietary needs we need to know about, we want to help you out with that. And then just have enough spaces or people on borrowed tents, that's fine, and things like that.
That's cheaper than it was.
And we got a great lineup of speakers coming already too for the theme of the topics of the Great Commission.
Yes. And it was super fun. I don't know how many of you guys made it last
It
year.
was awesome.
It was super
It's
fun.
gonna be even funner this time, because we don't have to stay outside with our dog.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like it.
I know.
Oh, I do too, I love him to pieces, but
Yeah.
Right, it is a responsibility.
But you wanted to put them in pieces when he was.
All right, cool. So last week, Brian and the last crew was here last week. you guys got into 2 Samuel 19. And I watched it online. Well, not that night. I was sick. Gosh, getting old. Can't eat like a teenager no more. I got sick. But anyway, praise God that my body is working. And so, anyway, so I watched it a couple days later. There was a lot of good stuff in there, and you guys had some really comments. You guys shared a lot of good thoughts. But before we pick up where you guys left off, does anybody want to kind of give us a recap, a reminder of what you guys talked about 1 through 11, verses 1 through 11 and 2 Samuel 19? Or just maybe a thought you guys remember.
Absalom's dead.
Absalom is dead. Yes.
The end.
Ding
David-
dong, which is
Gabe gets a little bit of a smack from his general.
oh,
Because he just spent all this time mourning.
Yes.
big rebuke.
Yeah, when he should have been celebrating the victory.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it kind of made everyone feel guilty as if they had lost.
Yes. Yeah. Listen to Pearl Jam.
Yeah, Black by Pearl
And
Jam. For junior high breakup.
Maybe they just needed to shake it up.
You can listen to it a couple times. You can't just do it on repeat over and over.
Yeah.
It's too much.
so, Brian made up a really good comment, so David loses his son, right? And he's not like Brian would phrase it, he's not a jerk dad. He's mourning for the loss of his son, but what we kind of see is, he really allowed that mourning to consume him to the point that he was not able to, function as a king and to give praises, to recognize God's blessing. God just saved them as a nation, saved David, and Joab rebukes David and points out and says, hey, God gave us a victory. He saved you, your wives, your concubines, all of us, all your servants. I mean, there's a lot to be grateful for, right? And so, really, really a good study last week. Let's see, what else you guys remember?
Went to the gate to go do his job.
Right. That going to the gate, symbolizing that he was there to do his kingly duties, right? And it says the people came to him, right? And so that was a basically, putting on his big boy boots and getting to work, right?
The big lesson for me in that situation is, on Joab's side, having the boldness to tell somebody when they're out of line in love, which is something I struggle with, and then having the humility to receive it when someone does it to me, which is also different. Both of those kind of take, humility, and then one takes some boldness.
Yeah.
And it's just a really good lesson just with that whole interaction.
Yeah, because David could have completely reacted and completely
Oh,
differently.
yeah. You could have been like, my son died. Are you
Yeah,
kidding me?
Yeah, how dare you, and
You chucked a spear at him, which would have been poetic.
yeah, right? Exactly. But he didn't, right? He actually took the words to heart, even though they were painful, right? I'm sure they were painful to hear. He took it to heart, and he went to the gate, started doing what he needed to do as a king. I also like that you guys were talking about Israel only wanted David back since their false king didn't work out for them, right? You guys have talked about that, and that comment of like, we do that with our false idols and our false gods, instead of actually seeking God and asking God to of whatever decision we're about to do, we're going to do this on our own accord or with the help of someone else or something else.
Or we get a promotion and now we have more money and we think that's what we wanted, and then we're still sad or still grumpy, and we realize, well, that God didn't work out, so I should probably go back to the real God.
Yeah. So that was really cool.
Wasn't that kind of his son's death? Wasn't that kind of the price he had to pay for some of the stuff he did that year?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, very true. So the Nathan, right? Nathan was the prophet, right? So
Yeah.
he's the one that came to David and basically told him, prophesied, what basically said, this is what God has said and is going to do because of your sin, right?
Right.
And basically said that the sword is not going to leave your kingdom, your household.
Yeah.
And so yes,
That's a pretty big weight to carry.
yeah, and I think like Brian had mentioned that's probably why David was mourning as much as he did, is because he was reflecting back on his own sins. He's like, oh my gosh, he said, oh Absalom, my Absalom, right? He was like taking some of the guilt upon himself, right, for the sins that he had committed. And I'm sure, like Brian said, everything that the prophet had told him is probably all just coming up again, right? It's fresh on his mind, and he's like, oh my gosh, all this is because of me. And
It's always that case of, hey, if I done something different, in this case, it was.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And I think we kind of talked a little bit about it, back when we're looking at David and just everything that happened back then. But it is interesting to think about how there are different types of punishment. This isn't like a full justice punishment, because if this was the weight of the entirety of all of David's sin, that would be like hell forever. This is more like God punishing David because we need to know as much as he does that God does not allow evil things to happen in such a way where we're just going to keep doing awful things because we think we can get away with it.
Yep, very good point. Yeah. And isn't it funny how our minds work like that? It's like you intentionally are sinning, you're like, oh, God didn't strike me down, so he must be cool with it, right? And he's not. He's just he's just gonna teach you a lesson in a different way, right? And so
If it wasn't for that ability, you probably couldn't say. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Yeah.
right.
It's not.
Yeah.
It's not a gift like.
Yeah, so good discussion last week, and so I just thought of something else. Last week you guys talked about, I think it was Heath wanted to see Ray in a small T-shirt or something like that. Yeah. I didn't see that anywhere in the
Neither of
scripture.
them are here to defend those
I
allegations.
missed that.
Oh, I heard.
I'm sure you did.
I was looking in 2 Samuel, but I didn't see that anywhere. Yeah, I was laughing. Yeah. Okay. So, so 2 Samuel 19, and what we're going to pick up is verse 11 again. Then King David sent to Zadok and Abiathar the priests, saying, speak to the elders of Judah, saying, why are you the last to bring back to this house, since the word of all Israel has come to the king, even to his house? Okay, you guys talked a little bit about that last week. It says, you are my brothers, verse 12, you are my brothers, you are my bone and my flesh. Why then should you be the last to bring back the king? Say to Amasa, are you not my bone and my flesh? May God do so to me, and more also, if you will not be commander of my army before me continually in place of Joab. Thus he turned the hearts of all the men of Judah as one man, so they sent word to the king, saying, return, you and all your servants. So last week, one of the other thoughts you guys had gone over was verse 11, where David, very rightly so, was the king, and he was victorious in this battle, and he could have had every right just to go back into the kingdom as the reigning king, as the victorious king. But He didn't, right? And he didn't want to go back on his own accord. He knew that being king, being put in, God put him in that position, and he knew that there was a division, okay, in the nation. And so he sends words to the priests saying, hey, go speak to the elders. I'm not going to come back as king unless you guys all with one heart approve of me coming back and being king, right? And it shows his humbleness, right? Because one, he doesn't take the victory, he doesn't take all the what's what I'm looking for? All the glory, right? He doesn't take all the glory and say, look, I'm the king, I won, right? I deserve the belt, I deserve the crown. Okay, he doesn't do that. He is patiently saying, okay, we need to bring everybody back together. And I am the king, but I'm not going to come back until I know that this is what everybody wants. Okay, and it's very interesting because he knows God's will for his life, which is to be king, right? And so he's trusting in that. He very well understands that he could send message out and everybody could say, heck no, we don't want David, right?
David's interesting because, like, you have so many other figures in the Old Testament, like Jacob or Abraham and Sarah, who often try to help God out with his promises. And David has his own struggles, right? But that's not one. David's not a guy who's going to try to do anything to manipulate or speed up God's process. He didn't want to be king, but he accepted the call. He could have killed Saul, but he was like, nah, this is going to be God's way. Like, I'm rightful king, but I don't want to do it unless everybody's on board. Obviously, that's God's thing. He'll make it happen. So that's one of the really cool things that we see consistently through David's life.
Yep.
But again, other patriarchs of the Bible that we see that do cool things, a lot of them are trying to help God, or do things their own way. And obviously David had, an issue with the ladies and with parenting. Those were his two big struggles.
Yeah.
But this was not one. And so that's a cool thing that we can try to, ask the Lord to model us after. And that is trusting in God's process and his promotion, his promoting of your name and, his control. So that's just something that's really stuck out to me in this.
Yeah.
That speaks of David's humility.
Mhm.
I think
Mm-hmm.
that's probably his greatest character trait.
Yeah.
Is his humility.
Yeah.
And his approach probably did kill him, like, whereas if he'd gone over the top, it probably would have.
Right. They would have been like, oh, this is where Fulham gets it from.
Yeah.
So his approach actually did probably kill him.
Yeah. Yeah, probably.
Because if you think about it, how many of us try to help God's hand, right? How many of us, no, I think this is God's will for me, so I'm gonna do this, right? And the one thing that
The Lord must want me to do this.
yeah, the Lord must not want me to do
Because
this.
he's
They just
taking too
approved
long.
my credit. Wow. And no money down?
Yeah.
Okay. Right?
They said I could buy this car. The Lord wants me to buy it, even though I have 6 and I'm in debt.
Yeah, it's kind of like Hamburger Helper, but the hamburger was better without it.
Right.
Yeah, stop helping. You're not helping. Thank you. You just shut down my entire childhood with that one phrase. One statement. You just called me
Yeah,
an
it's
80s
funny.
white trash kid.
You know what's funny is it wasn't until I was an adult cooking hamburger helper for my own kids when I realized this really isn't that great. Right? So, but as a kid, right, I was like, ooh.
It's more like dad helper.
Yeah.
It's more like dad helper.
Yeah.
Dad
Yeah.
helper. Your turn to cook? Okay, we got you.
Yeah.
But it's not
Yeah.
just him.
David sends a message, right? David would not force himself or his. So David's not going to force his reign on Israel, and he's only going to come back if those tribes who were first against him are now for him. Okay,
They pretty much had to be anonymous, right?
yeah,
One person could have.
yeah, and that's what's interesting is we see and David is smart, right? He's really trying to reconcile the kingdom because he puts Amasa, right, who was Absalom's captain, and he now appoints him as his own captain in place of Joab, right? And so this is putting Joab in his place, because Joab was disobedient to David's command, which was to spare Absalom, right? But he was disobedient in that. And even though we see Absalom being wrong there, he was right in the way he confronted David. Okay, and so David now says, Amasa is now going to be my captain, and pushes Joab off to the side, not completely out, but just pushes him out of being the commander. And so this shows the nation that David is really making an effort to reconcile all the tribes, right? Because there were those tribes who were against David who really liked Amasa, right? They liked Absalom, they liked Amasa, and now David is putting him as captain. And so it says here at the that David turned the hearts of all the men of Judah as one man, all their hearts, as one. So they sent word to the king saying, "Return, you and all your servants." And so it's just really cool, that like Therese, like what you said, that we see this humility, right? And that's really important because there are many times in our lives where we think about where we were stepped over, right? We were the ones that deserved to be the next one in line, whether it's a job promotion, whether it's a title, whether it was whatever, a winning or whatever, a prize, whatever. And we were kind of stepped over, right? And I just thought of a situation myself, brought back. Anyway, dang girl. But anyway,
Dang, girl.
yeah. No, I'll share that real quick. Came to my mind. So, as years ago, I was working at Allstate. They had this life insurance promo, and they said, whoever sells or whoever gets licensed and then sells so many life policies. This is when iPads were first coming out. We're gonna give you a free iPad, and I was like, sweet. I was already going to study for that test. I was already in the process. So I was like, oh man, I already got a head start on everybody. So I went and I passed my test, right? And then I sold so many life policies after that. And I was like, I was the only one who did that, right? And there was like 2 days left. And you guys, and the reason why I'm going to share this, right? Because some of you guys know, little Tammy, right? We used to go to church here. Tammy, what's her name? What was her name? Sargent. Yeah, Tammy Sargent. Okay. She was also working at Allstate with Tasha in a different office, and Tammy was studying, and everything, and actually helped Tammy pass her, with her study because I thought, there's no way. There's 2 days left. She's not going to have, there's no way she's going to pass it. There's not enough time. So I was like helping Tammy, giving her tips and everything, right? And so the time ended, right? Yeah, the time ended, right? And I'm like, yes, right? I was the only one in the district that did that. Well, then the sales manager decided, well, we're going to extend it a week because, there was a couple people right on the edge, right? That almost had their test. And so then Tammy gets in, right?
Of course.
And I'm like, whoa, wait a second, right? I'm like, okay, they're still probably going to give it to me though, because I'm the one that did it first and I got the life sales, right? So they extended another week. Well, the week comes in, now it's just Tammy and I, right? Now the whole district, right? And I'm like, I still got it. I know I got it. And so then they make this big announcement, blah, 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 they send out, blast out an email to the district. Congratulations, Tammy Sargent, blah, blah, blah. Right? And I'm like, wait a second.
Sell more?
No! No!
You were wrong.
I was robbed, right? I was so mad, right? And anyway, so
Yeah, here,
Tammy,
Laura, you should have wore a skirt to the office.
so Tammy
Or
Sargent wins the
impossible.
iPad, right? And I was, and even my boss, right, in the office, I'm in Burlington. She's like, "That's not right. I'm calling the district manager right now." And so she did. She called him, chewed him out, right, and said, "You will buy Ruben another one." She goes, "I don't care if it's out of your own money. He rightfully won that, and he was the only one that didn't everything that you told him to do. He was the only one." And he's like, "Whoa," you know, all this stuff. And after I seen her like get upset and call it, I was like, I don't want to win it like that, right? So I sent an email right to the district sales manager. His name was Ross. Remember Ross? Sent a message and say, "Hey Ross, don't worry about it." Because the more I thought about it, I was like, God probably didn't want me to win that because it probably was going to be another distraction,
Angry Birds.
right? Yeah, yeah.
Or
Yeah,
Fluffy Birds.
Plants
whatever.
Against Zombies or whatever that is, right? I mean, it was.
Candy Crush.
Yeah. It was going to be another. So that's how that's what God spoke to my heart. Ruben, you don't need this right now. This, even though you want this, you don't need this, right? And that's how I kind of took it. I was like, okay, all right. So I sent that email to Ross. I said, "Hey, that's cool. Don't worry about it. Let Tammy have it. It's all good." "Well, I promise I'll make it." And I was like, "Don't worry about it."
It's cool your boss stuck up for you though.
Yes, yeah. So anyway, so David, sorry, I went way off there. So David, being humble, right? He's like, why? He sends word out, right? He wants to make sure that everybody's on the same page. Everybody wants him to be king before he goes back, right? And they get word out and say, they tell David, for him, and it says, where was I? "Return you and all your servants." Okay, verse 15. The king then returned and came as far as the Jordan, and Judah came to Gilgal in order to go to meet the king to bring the king across the Jordan. So he agrees, and so if you remember when he was running from Absalom, he had crossed the Jordan River, right? And they were hightailing it out of there, right? They're like, "Man, Absalom's coming. We need to cross the fords, right? And we need to go. We need to get out of here, right?" And so now they get word that, hey, come back. So they start making their way. They get to the Jordan River, and it says that that Judah, the tribe of Judah came to Gilgal, which was a place of, I believe, a place of worship. It held a special place, it was a special place in order to go meet the king and to bring the king across the Jordan. All right. Verse 16. Then Shimei, the son of Gera, the Benjaminite, who was from Bahurim, hurried and came down with the men of Judah to meet King David. Who remembers this guy?
He's grumpy.
He's a yelling guy on
Grumpy grandpa.
Yeah,
insults to David.
right?
Flips.
Wasn't he throwing rocks
He's a
and
dead dog.
But why did he do that to David though?
Dead dog.
yeah,
Why did he do it to David though?
yeah. Why? Why was he treating David like that?
Because of the son? Was it
David had a
his son?
thing with his granddaughter.
You remember that?
Yeah. This Bathsheba's grumpy grandpa.
Yeah.
Who used to be homies with David before,
Mm-hmm. Before David did
he
that.
slept with his granddaughter and killed her husband.
Yeah.
What's that?
Yeah, yeah. And even the men around David at the time that Shimei was there throwing rocks and cussing and throwing dirt and all sorts of stuff, calling him all sorts of names. even the men around David said, let us go cut his head off,
That made you go.
right?
No.
He is a dead
was
dog.
actually
Let us go
Bathsheba's
cut his
son.
head off. Let's end this. And David says, no. Maybe God asked him to do this. Right? Remember that? David said,
Again, David's humility, because like
yeah,
David's not afraid to like dispatch an enemy, an actual enemy, but he knows he did something wrong, and he's just kind of like, yeah, actually, again, like Sheree said, I'd be a grumpy grandpa too, honestly, if I was him.
Yep.
So
so yeah, so Shimei, the son of Gera, so he comes down with the men of Judah to meet King David. This is really cool. There were 1,000 men of Benjamin with them, with Ziba, the servant of the house of Saul, and his 15 sons and his 20 servants with him. And they rushed to the Jordan before the king. Remember Ziba? Who's Ziba?
a weird alcoholic drink from the 90s. No, just kidding. That's Zima. Anyway.
Who remembers who Ziba is? Nobody remembers?
He wasn't the counselor, was he, who was deceptive to Absalom? No.
He,
Yeah, that's right.
he was not a counselor.
Okay,
No,
okay, that was the
The
other.
priest?
But he was the one that gave really bad advice.
no, he's not. So he showed up. Okay, I'll back up a little bit, tell you. He showed up to David with a train of donkeys with goods, with supplies.
Oh,
Right? But who is he? Who is he? Where did he get those supplies? Where did he come from?
Is he the Mephibosheth's servant?
Yep.
Saul's son, the lame
Ah,
son that was
that's
brought
right.
Yes.
when his nurse dropped him.
Yes. So David had commanded Ziba to take care of Ziba and his 15 sons and the 20 servants to care for Mephibosheth, right?
Saul's son,
Yeah, Saul's grandson.
grandson, David's, no, Jonathan's son.
Oh,
Yep.
that's right. He extended that promise. that he
Yeah.
made good.
Right? But then as David and his followers are in the wilderness running from Absalom, Ziba shows up with this train of supplies, right? And he starts talking ill of Mephibosheth, saying that he has stayed in Jerusalem, hoping that things work out for him so that the kingdom of Saul will be restored. Right? He's telling all these lies because David says, why are you here? And why do you have all this stuff? Right? Almost implying, didn't I tell you to go take care of Mephibosheth? Right? And now he's one of the first ones that we read about who shows up when King David comes to the Jordan River. Right? So we see, and it's interesting that there are so many people, there's thousands of people, right? And so it shows, it's really cool to see that as a nation, they are unifying around this move. Thousands of people are coming to help David, right? Bring David and all his servants and all his stuff back, okay? And so verse 18, then they kept crossing the ford to bring over the king's household and to do what is good in his sight. And Shimei, the son of Gera, fell down before the king as he was about to cross the Jordan. So he said to the king, let not my lord consider me guilty, nor remember what your servant did wrong on the day when my lord the king came out of Jerusalem, so that the king would take it to heart. For your servant knows that I have sinned. I have come today, the first of all. You know, this reminds me of things I should have done. There was a time when I worked out at the sugar factory years ago, and I had a mouth. I was a believer. I was a Christian. I was a believer, but man, I had a mouth, right? And it was interesting because for the most part, when I was home or when I was on my days off, I didn't talk like that for the most part. But when I was at the factory, man. And I think I told you this story one time. I was telling a joke. There was about 4 or 5 guys there, and they were all listening and everything, and they all laughed at my joke, and they all walked away, right? And I was running my mouth. And I grabbed my hard hat because the break was over, and I turned around to walk back to where I needed to go, and my dad was standing there. Right? And I felt this big. And I was like, oh. And I said, Dad, I'm so sorry. And he said, you don't have to apologize to me. He said, you need to apologize to the Lord. And I was like, oh, even if it was possible to feel his fun, I mean, it was just, I was like, man, right? But this guy right here, running his mouth, it made, when I read this part, and it shows the true heart of him, of this man, he goes to who he wronged, he admits his faults, and he asks for forgiveness. He's repenting, right? And so much of this story has so many resemblance of God. God's not going to force himself on you or on us, right? David was not going to force himself on people, right? And then we see people running to the king asking for forgiveness, right? That's what we need to do, right? We need to ask God. We sin every day, all the time. We need to go with our king, bow down, admit our sins, and ask for forgiveness.
Right.
Right? And so we see him, he's like, man, I'm sorry. I made it a point to get here as soon as possible. I wanted to be, I don't know if he was a very, very first one, but he wanted to make sure that he was one of the first people there.
Definitely
Right.
the first from his tribe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. He wanted to make sure he was one of the first ones there to ask for forgiveness. First, to admit his faults. And then 2, to ask for forgiveness.
And when I was first like chewing on this, I was like, why didn't he do this before? And he's just doing this because David now might seek him out and kill him. So this is his only chance to survive, maybe. But it was like, no, like he risks a lot actually doing this, bringing it up, and like being bold. And just like the guys with David, like the first thought that comes to their mind is, oh yeah, there's that guy, we should cut his head off. Like, ready for that now? So I do think it is a little bit sus that he shows up when he does, but it's actually good that I feel like it's real. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like it's, because he immediately says, I've sinned. He doesn't come and start kissing butt. Like, hey, David, I've always loved you, bro. Like, everything's cool. Like, I had this twin that was acting all wild, like, a couple weeks ago, but I killed him. But anyway, so, like, dude, it's good to see you, bro. You want to play Smash Bros? I do think that it's real.
Yeah.
It's just, to me, it was pretty suspect at first because I was like,
At first, I was a little suspicious too, but
Yeah.
kind of like that. The fact that he went to the king,
mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Versus
Says
where
a lot.
David is making on his way back is, oh yeah, this is that area that we ran into that guy.
Yeah, it says
and
a
that
lot.
guy there, he's like, oh hey, I was gonna come see you. Yeah, about that. Sorry, bro. Right now.
I have Tourette's actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, isn't that the difference between a person that's actually repentant versus someone that's not?
Right.
Yep.
Like, it could have went both ways, but
He's not trying to sidestep the issue at all. He's confronting it right away.
Right. Yep.
He's like, man, I really hope you didn't take that to heart. I know I sinned. I know this was wrong. Like, yeah, it's good.
Okay. And then
He did a really good job.
Mm-hmm.
okay, verse 21. So Shimei comes and he's repenting, asking David for forgiveness. And right there, verse 21, it says, but Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, said, should not Shimei be put to death for this? Because he cursed the Lord's anointed? Good point, right? But then David said, what have I to do with you, O son of Zeruiah, that you should this day be an adversary to me? Should any man be put to death in Israel today? Or do I not know that I am king over Israel today? The king said to Shimei, you shall not die. That's the king's word to him. So, it just goes to show, the people were surrounding David, right? Aren't so humble and forgiving. Yes, it has.
I was gonna say, it also shows that David is confident in the position he was given.
Exactly.
He's not letting anyone else tell him that he's not.
Yeah,
Because again, it's easy for David to forgive a guy who deserved to die. Because one, he did something deserving of death himself, and two, he knows God gave him the throne, and so he doesn't have to defend it. He doesn't have to protect it. He doesn't have to. It's God's thing. So
Yep. Yeah.
it's good.
you know, that's one thing that as believers, as followers of Jesus Christ, we should not be holding grudges.
You know what I realize it's a sign of? Insecurity.
It is.
Grudge holding is an insecurity response.
Yeah. Because you think about it, you've accepted Jesus as your Lord and Savior. You've accepted the fact that He died for your sins, and you're willing to, and out of, you're like, yeah, forgive me, right? Forgive my sin, right? But then someone has wronged you, or upset you, or said something behind your back, or took your promotion, or took your iPad, or whatever, and you hold a grudge, right? You hold a grudge. You don't forgive the person.
So you're hanging on to the IOU for 3 cents when
Yeah.
your debt was like written off. With
Yeah.
3 bucks.
Exactly.
It's like,
Right.
oh.
Yeah, we need to learn to forgive. You know, I've had some conversations with some friends, and you know, they share some stuff, and you know, one guy sharing about, you know, some stuff about his ex-wife, and you know, he just says, I'll never forgive her, and I'm like, but you have to. I don't. Like, yeah, you do. You want God to forgive you, right? Then you need to forgive also.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, it's just not that easy. And I'm like, no, it actually is that easy. It is. And like Brian said, you know, it's just how'd you put it when we're done? What did you say?
That Ryan said it. He said, holding grudges is just it's a symptom or a sign of insecurity.
Insecurity, right? Exactly.
You're not secure in the Lord and what He can do through forgiveness, and or in yourself and the way He made you, and so you're holding on to and you're fighting. And
You could call it a shadow of an unbelieving heart too. Because,
oh, for sure,
for
because
sure.
you're lacking security in the Lord and in the way He made you and who He made you.
Yep.
Because all of my struggles have all come to insecurity, like as far as, you know, struggling to let go of something and forgive, and to try to forget or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm afraid no, because then, you know, then there's no justice done for that, and then they get away with it, and then they might do it again, and then there's just all this that comes along with it because I'm insecure that all that stuff is out of my control.
Well, it becomes personal too. Because
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard.
So he forgives Shimei. Let's see. All right. Yeah, we got a few minutes. We got time. Then Mephibosheth, the son, or actually it says the son of Saul, but the grandson of Saul, came down to meet the king, and and Mephibosheth neither cared for his feet or trimmed his mustache or washed his clothes from the day the king departed until the day he came home in peace. Interesting, right?
In mourning.
And maybe a morning, maybe let's call it morning. I don't know what other word, but basically, yeah, like, oh man, the rightful king is pushed out, and you know, and now I'm depressed and don't want to care for myself. Yeah.
Kind of like a sackcloth and ashes.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Verse 25, and it was when he came from Jerusalem to meet the king that the king said to him, why did you not go with me, Mephibosheth? So he answered, oh, my lord, the king, my servant deceived me. Talking about Ziba. For your servant said, I will saddle a donkey for myself that I may ride on it and go with the king. Because your servant is lame. So I almost get the idea here that Mephibosheth actually is the one that started to get his donkeys and supplies already. because he was going to go with the king. But then took it all and left them behind. Oh, crazy. Verse 27, it says, moreover, he has slandered your servant to my lord the king, but the Lord the king is like an angel of God. Therefore, do what is good in your sight. For all my father's household was nothing but dead men before my lord the king, yet you set your servant over those who ate at your own table. So Mephibosheth is remembering, saying, hey, my family was dead until you came along. I'm glad you're back. Right? You actually gave me a spot at your table. Okay. So the king said to him, why do you still speak of your affairs? I have decided you and Ziba shall divide the land. Interesting, right? Because when Ziba deceived David, he basically told Ziba, I am giving all that land that I gave back to Mephibosheth that was from Saul. I'm going to give it to you, Ziba. Right? Because he believed Ziba, he believed that Mephibosheth had actually stayed in Jerusalem, was hoping that the kingdom would fall apart and that the line of Saul would restore power again. Okay? But, so David now, he said, Mephibosheth said to the, or okay, so now David's saying, okay, I'm going to split this land. And he says, he said, you and Ziba shall divide this land, the land that belonged to Saul, his grandfather. Mephibosheth said to the king, let him even take it all, since my lord the king has come safely to his own house. So Mephibosheth said, I don't even care about that stuff. I'm just glad you're back. Because guess what? My life was so much better with you on the throne. And you not being on the throne, my life was a mess. There was fear. I don't know if I was going to be killed. I didn't have anybody taking care of me. He says, but you're back. And I feel safe. I'm good. Let him have it all.
You think there's some parallels in there too? Like he called an angel of the Lord. It's kind of a trip because you think there are some people who are going to be more grateful when they get to heaven than others. Like you can think of two people who are getting into heaven equally, but one thinks he's getting way more rewards than anybody else, and one who's just happy to get into heaven.
And that's what's rad about Mephibosheth is he's got this like
he's that kind of
he's had such a hard life.
Yeah,
He's had such a hard life that all the kindness that David gave to him was multiplied by 10. Where someone who had a good life, they take kindness for granted, right? It's like, yeah, like Jesus says, to whom much is forgiven, them loves much or whatever. Like, yeah, that's good, dude. That's a good
Well,
point.
it's a neat word picture too of when David's on the throne, all things are made right.
As they
It's
should
like
be, yeah.
when you place God on the throne in his rightful place in your life, all things are going to work together for your good and God's glory. But when you displace him from the throne and you put him in the back seat, and you take the wheel, then it's not so bad.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I saw, and I don't remember word for word. I wish I would have screenshot it or something. I saw it posted on Instagram, and it showed this homeless man sitting on the sidewalk reading the Bible, and it said that this man and having the Word of God and having the salvation is the richest man, is full of riches, right? Compared to someone who has all the things of the world but doesn't have salvation in Jesus. He is broken. He is poor, right? And it is the one who's really discovered salvation through Jesus and has the Word of God. He is full of riches. And I think, like you said, like we pointed out, this parallel of putting God in his rightful place, right? We start to recognize who we are. We're safe. I'm just glad you're there. I'm glad you're in my life. Stuff. I don't need all that land, my house. I don't need servants. I don't need money. I'm just glad you are where you are. I am safe with you in the rightful spot. Right? It's amazing. Because some of us were like, hey, that was my land. Why are you giving it half to that guy? He's the one that lied.
When in a way, David's even though it was based on a false pretense, he made a promise to Ziba.
Ziba?
So,
Yep.
you know, and maybe Ziba will, you know, face a court later in some, you know, alternate ending. But yeah, like Mephibosheth, it's almost like David's testing him in the same way Jesus tests the woman who is like, hey, please, please. And he's like, is it right for, you know, the food for the children to go to the dogs? And she goes, well, yeah, but even the crumbs. And, you know, and it was like, there's some great faith because there's humility, you know, and I think Mephibosheth is a really rad picture of that. He just wants the glory of the king. He doesn't care if he has his stuff back.
Yep.
And again, like, man, you know, you go to your class reunions and each time it's like a flex show. Oh yeah, what do you do for a living? Oh, well, you know, I bought my second house, and you know, and like there's all this like, you know, bragging and whatever else. And I went in Southern California, so it's absolutely terrible. It's just they all laid on thick, and it just makes me laugh. But it's just like there's this, man, if you don't have so much by a certain time, then you're missing out on life. Mephibosheth's like, dude, God's been good to me. David's been good to me. Like, David's back. Dude, there's nothing cooler in this life that could happen. Like, I'm good. You know, it's just, that's such a rad attitude. And this is a guy who, you know, he's got a disability in the ancient world. It's bad enough these days with all the technology and, you know, people making a way for people with disabilities. In the ancient world, yeah, they're treated like garbage and had no technology to help, you know? And so, yeah. And so just the dude gets it. He's rad. And it's a blessing probably that he was disabled because it kept him humble and he actually took the humility, you know? Where some people would be just bitter and grumpy at God. He's just like, no, this is rad. You know, dude's solid.
Awesome.
The other thing to realize is in David's point of view, he promised it, and he knows God will make it right, because he's always.
Correct.
He's got that.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Well, we're gonna wrap up there. We'll pick up in 31 next week.
Party.
All right. All right. Cool. Can we get someone volunteer to close us in prayer? Okay, we'll stay then.
We'll just stay here until somebody volunteers.
Yeah.
By the way, we have a trailer to empty out too, so if
Oh.
you wanna stay and help us move stuff in,
For the rummage sale.
yeah.
Okay.
And then if you wanna
It
come
looks
back
like
on
it's
Saturday
getting
at
rain.
4 to
Yeah.
put the chairs back in the sanctuary, Saturday at 4,
Yeah.
the team would really help with that.
Yes, that would be awesome.
I think Noe wants to close in prayer.
What's that, to help?
To close in prayer.
Oh,
You wanna close us in prayer, brother?
I was just thinking what to say.
The Lord will give it to you.
We just thank you, dear Heavenly Father, for this wonderful day for Ruben,
Yeah.
and answer that the first gave, the lesson about David. We just love it, Lord, take it home, and, help us, to do what we need to do. And help,
Yeah.
give us our rest tonight, in the name of Jesus, amen.
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 Amen. Thank you, brother.
Sign up if you want to pray for the 24 hours.
Yeah.